But yes, words have to be blended in with gestures. Words by themselves, you read a book and you read a book and you read a book, then you started getting tired and yawn and yawn, and you have to try to concentrate. You have to try to understand what the author is trying to tell you there. But when it's on a one-on-one, and there's something graphic being explained to you, with words, it has a more forceful ability to be memorized. The impact is there. Yes, people who express themselves with their hands, it's just like if two people meet up and they say, "I'd like to be your friend," and the other one says, "Yes, I'd like to be your friend," and that's all. Right? They both want to be their friends. Let's go and have a drink. All right, let's go and have a drink. So they are disconnected. So where is the connection? The first one says, "I would like to be your friend." So that is the gesture which has to be made. Then it's up to the other person to either say, "I'll think about that. I take a long time to make a friendship. Just give me 1 or 2 minutes." So it all depends on how strong the intent is of that connection. As long as the delay is explained in a nice way, then number one will wait. Whereas if number two says it in a nice way, it takes me a little bit of time to really meet up with strangers. And if number one, who is a stranger, says, "Oh well, all right, too late. There are plenty of others," it's a very shallow connection. You can see that number one is purely for his own ego. He has no genuine intention. The depth of intention is very shallow. And unfortunately, that is what life is nowadays, you'll find. There's no real, genuine intent of connecting and making a friendship. It's always using someone for a particular purpose. And what they can get, it's the ego factor comes into it. What can I get out of that connection? Rather than what can I give to make the connection a good connection. There isn't that particular depth of intent. Yes. You'll find in some societies and in some civilizations, they connect in different ways. The normal accepted Western way is shake hands. It's a very cold way. Whereas you'll find some of the older communities, they embrace. Now that is more meaningful. And especially when it is a double embrace, it is even more so. I learned a lot about meaningful connection from the owner of a very huge multinational company who I worked for when I was in my late 20s. Jürgen S. Lien, he had a personality. He's a Norwegian. He had factories in different countries in the world, so he had to meet up with all kinds of societies, with some who could understand him. He could speak Norwegian fluently, but some of the other languages very little, with common phrases. And with English, he could get by because English is a popular business language. And because he was traveling to different countries in the world, this is where he was selling all his products, he picked up English quite well. But he still lacked that, what they may call the perfection of really understanding. And I still remember when I went down, I got to a conference. It was a sales conference. I got there late. Now, he was in Norway, and the meeting was in Norway, in Bergen. I had to come from London, and I missed the connection, so I had to travel down on Monday, so I missed the weekend. Now, I was pretty good sales in the marketing side, and he had heard about my reputation as a very good salesman through his own connections, because his own managing director in England used to say, Mr. Percival, top salesman in England. And however, he must have told Jürgen S. Lien that Mr. Percival has missed the general, the rest came across by ship. He said he'll be flying in on Monday. Now that multi-billionaire, I still remember this. We went into this huge palatial hotel, and I went in there when I arrived, and next morning I came down, walking down the stairs, and all I could see was at the bottom of this winding staircase was just a mass of faces, because there were all these different countries, different reps from different countries were there in this foyer. And I was looking for the group, my group, which was from London, and I couldn't see them anyway. I gradually came down the stairs, and before I reached the bottom, who should be standing in my way but a big Norwegian. I didn't know he was Norwegian, but he was a big man. And then he looked at me and he said, Mr. Percival, I presume. Just imagine that. Of all the thousands or hundreds of names, he remembered my name. Again, I was a brown guy coming out from England, top salesman, so I had a reputation. So that pleased him, his products. So he must have wanted to know me, or at least to acknowledge me. And there he was. He said, "Mr. Percival, I presume." I said, in surprising, I said, "Yes." He says, so he put his hand out and he said, so I clasped his hand with a handshake, and he immediately overclasped my hand. And he says, "Jürgen Estlien himself." And he kicked his heels in a very Germanic way. And that has always been a picture in my head. This billionaire, owner of this huge conglomeration, took the time to notice who was coming down the stairs. And it was a brown guy. And his memory recall was Mr. Percival, I presume. Now just imagine that. And when he double clasped him, later on I asked him, when I was chatting with him, I said, "Mr. Lane," I said, "why do you always put your left hand over mine as a double clasp with both your hands?" And he says, "It is my way of showing you that I am not only showing you friendship with the conventional shake, and that I haven't got a dagger in my left hand behind my back. So I cannot stab you in the back. This is my gesture." And that, it was mind-blowing. Can you imagine? I was so young, just starting my sales careers, and to have, I would say, a mentorish inspiration like that. The impact was boom. And another thing, he used to have this conference for 10 days. Can you imagine that? Thousands and thousands and thousands, which he must have spent on about 700-800 people, or maybe even 1,000 people. And right at the end of the conference, every day there was some activity, etc. He even took us. He used to commandeer yachts, big sailing yachts. All the guests could just pile onto any of these yachts, and they used to go up the fjords, eating, drinking. All the cabin doors were locked, obviously, right, because there were men and women there. But it was there, lavish. And when we came back in the evening, there was this flotilla of fireworks which he had arranged. It was Hollywood style personified. And on his last day, the banquet, and at this thing, he had his closing speech. I can still remember it. So it just shows, 55, 60 years ago. This man, he just ambled up there after he had, after everyone had, banquet was laid out banquet style, where there were tiers on tiers of table. So you just went up there, and the table was a 3-tier table. Food, food, and food. Right? And they were all over this huge dining hall. So you had your tables and you just went up and you helped yourself to anything. And after everyone had wined and dined, he got up on the stage and he said, "My friends," he says, "I have to thank you for taking so much trouble in coming to Norway from so many different countries in the world and flying here all these distances just to be here, but you have earned it because you are the top, you are the cream of the company. And I'm not a singer, but," he says, "I have got a favorite song. And if you will excuse my voice and any mistakes I make in the words, just say it is me. But I'm trying to express myself as I feel." And he got the band to start off, and the tune which they played was "You Are My Sunshine." And there, "You are my sunshine, my only sunshine." And he walked around, then he came down and he walked around every table. Can you imagine that? In this huge dining or banquet hall. And he was saying to everyone, "You are my sunshine, my only sunshine." And he didn't say anything more than that, except for repeat the song over and over and over again. Then he went back up to the stage and he says, I will now tell you why I've chosen that special song which means so much to me. He says, after thanking you for coming here, he says, "You are my sunshine. Without you, I am a nobody." How modest is that from a multi-billionaire telling you? But there I was again, single. Everyone else around were either married couples or they were family. So I couldn't barge in, and I was a misfit as a single person. Tag. So I used to go all the way into Brisbane along Capalabal Road, and these police traps, speed traps, oh gosh. So it meant running the gauntlet all the time to get social contacts and to be socially active. But then it meant another 45 minutes drive back from Brisbane all the way, run the gauntlet to Thornlands. So, but it was a nice, very nice location. I had a few friends because I used to go to the gym there. So, yes, I had pleasant connections there.
You seem to stay quite fit and healthy, Mel.
I'm very fortunate in as much that it must be in my genes, because most guys at my age, for one thing, they wouldn't be going to well, they certainly wouldn't go to the gym. Now, I've just stopped going to the gym because at 87 plus, I found that I was a misfit there, because the next youngest group of people were in their 60s, 65 maximum. And the men used to go upstairs, do their stretching classes and aerobics with the girls, and I was downstairs pumping iron. So I was doing something wrong there. So
should have been upstairs.
So in the end, I said, I've been in the gym, nearly 6 years, just in this gym. So wherever I went, I always belonged to a gym. It kept me fit. So, and I'm very fortunate in as much that I've got such an active brain as well. So I'm not likely to get Alzheimer's or any limiting factor where that's concerned, because I'm always writing very long letters of impact. I even fought my own divorce case through the High Court. I told you that?
No, you didn't tell me.
Yes, because I found that my solicitor was double-crossing me with the other solicitor. There were 3 other solicitors on the other side, plus a barrister. So I kicked my solicitor out, and I said that I would represent myself. And the magistrate was even surprised, because he was the guy who told me to get myself a solicitor. So I told him why I had kicked this guy out after the first appearance in court. I said that he wasn't working with my interest in mind. So I booted him out, and in the end, as destiny would have it, I won the case.
You won the case defending yourself?
Against 3 solicitors and a very clever young barrister. But then because the magistrate had to make up his mind, he had to make the decision. Normally the magistrate depends on the 2 batches of solicitors. And he says, are you satisfied everything's done? Are you satisfied? All right, case finished. Right? And then he just writes a summary. In my particular case, I was just a layman against this legal batch. So he had to be the umpire. There was no easy way out for him. He had to make a decision, because I put in all my arguments, and in other words, it came to a point where I didn't mince words. I called them liars. Now, you don't go calling other people liars in court. A solicitor will not call the other solicitor a liar. He will say there is a certain amount of untruth. Soft. I went out and I said, they are liars. And here is my analysis. In the end, Magistrate Bowman, he took 9 weeks to make up his mind. Normally, it takes 3 weeks. He took 9 weeks. And then he called me in and he said, yeah, Mr. Percival, well, how much have you got in your bank account? I said, well, in my piggy bank I've got about 23,000. Now he had to give the other side something. He couldn't just say, you pay the expenses. Can you imagine that? If they had to pay my expenses, but my expenses were low because I was writing my own case. And he came down pretty harsh on them, in as much that first of all he said, all right, he ordered that I pay 20,000 to my ex-wife. 20,000. So he nearly drained my piggy bank. And then came the shock, because he said each party will pay their own costs. Can you imagine that? So my costs were small, her costs were huge. 2 years of battling through the courts. So she only got 20,000. The solicitors wanted to grab the lot. She said, no, the agreement was you could take half. So the solicitors ended up with 10,000, right? For 2 years' work. Think of it. 2 years. A law firm getting $10,000?
It's not much.
Right?
No.
It's a pittance.
Yeah.
Doesn't pay for that paperwork. And in the meantime, they'd hired this barrister. So the solicitors had to pay the barrister. So how much do you think the barrister got for 3 days in court?
He probably would have got like $5,000 or $6,000.
He would have wiped the whole lot off. So he must have taken half. He would have had 5,000, which is a kick in the pants. The solicitors then got 5 out of the 10. 5,000 for 2 years' work. Anyway, I got the summary letter. I've still got it from Magistrate Bowman when he confirmed all the legal jargon, because I'm not a legal man, but I've got common sense and logic got me through. Plus, I believe I've got my spirits and my angels and things from outer space which empower me. I firmly believe that, because how can I win against that? A legal battle in the High Court? And even Magistrate Bowman, in the summary, he said, this amazing octogenarian, because I was over 80. Yes, I was 82.
So this was only recent?
I was 82 when I finished that case. And he said, this amazing octogenarian, etc., etc., etc. I've got 2 pages of his summary. So, what gave me, or who, or how did I have the power to do that.
It's quite
And
lucky. It's like
And
someone's
I've
looking
even
out
fought
for you.
governments. I fought the Australian government. I fought against Howard and Ruddock, who was the immigration minister. This is when I married Valentina. Ruddock insisted that she goes back to Russia and applies for a spouse visa in Russia. She couldn't do it here. Think of it. And I was married here. Proper certificate. Marriage, Australian certificate. Now, I'm British as well as Australian, so I've got dual nationality. So Ruddock sent her back, and I said, all right, 3 months, you'll be back again. I was wrong, because as soon as she got there, she filled in the application form, gave it into the embassy and the ambassador in Moscow. 3 weeks later, back came the reply, rejected. She couldn't come back to Russia, to Australia. I was married in Australia. I'm dual nationality, including Australian nationality, and yet Ruddock dug his heels in and said, she can't come back here, she doesn't qualify. Doesn't qualify? So who do you think had to take up the fight again?
Mr Percival.
Only one individual. And it took me about 18 months of fighting the Australian government. They sent my documents from Canberra when I made it too hot for Ruddock. He sent it to Moscow, thinking that would quiet me down because I would have to communicate with Russia. Wrong. They were wrong. I made it so hot for the ambassador in Russia. He sent it back to Canberra. When it came back to Canberra, I started pumping Ruddock and Howard, so they sent it back to Russia again. Shortly after that, they sent it back from Moscow back to Canberra. And then that's when I wrote to Ruddock and I said, look here, Mr. Ruddock, I'm fed up of your government playing games. You are the minister. You better make the decision. And as you are not able to make the decision, I'm taking you to arbitration. So I took him to the independent arbitration. And I had his decision overturned. Valentina phoned me from Moscow. She said, darling, I've got my visa now. I said, you have? Oh, that's wonderful. Well, when are you coming back? She said, I'm on my way within 2 days.
That's amazing.
So it just shows what you can do. But how did I get that power at that age? No matter what age, how many laymen can fight a government or fight the legal system? So there must be a higher power than the worldly chappies around here. I would say the humans, because my power must come from another galaxy. Otherwise, how could I have done it? I'm not a barrister, and yet I can turn. Now, Ruddock was a barrister. Think of that. And a government minister.
And you took him to the court of
Just look
arbitration.
how they're playing with the boat people now. They're just, it's sickening.
Yes.
But yes, I've been so fortunate in so many ways. My life has been very, very interesting. It's been very challenging. I've had so many challenges. I think anyone else would have just curled up and given up and said, right, I'm going to commit suicide or I'll just go off somewhere into the oblivion. So, yes, even when I had my hotels in England, interest rates were 20%. 20%. I had 32 staff. 32 staff to pay. It was a pretty large hotel. And when you start paying the bank back your mortgage on your borrowing, and the bank is watching you like a hawk, there's so many hoteliers which just went bump. They couldn't keep up with their payments. It's just like what's happening here in Australia here, with people not being able to pay their mortgage. Just imagine, and what's the interest rate here now? 6%, 7%? I was paying 20%. So it was the interesting challenge. How I did it, who knows? Anyway, I told Maggie Thatcher, I said, I'm off. I said, I'm tired of all your bureaucracy. I'm tired of paying high taxes. I'm tired of paying playing according to union rules. I'm tired of paying high wages to all my staff while I am living on petty cash. Even the inspector of taxes came down and he looked at the payroll and he said, Mr. Percival, I can't see your name on this pay list. He said, are you the owner of this hotel? I said, yeah, I happen to be the owner. He said, then why aren't you on the pay list? I said, I can't afford to pay myself a wage. At 20% interest to the bank, I have to pay the mortgage first. The bank comes first. He says, but you should be drawing a salary. I said, no, I'm not drawing, and I'm not going to draw a salary. I said, I live on petty cash. So I asked my accountant, the girl, I said, bring the big books over here. I laid it out. I said, there we are. There's all my expenses. It's listed down there, signed, and it's marked against my name. It's all in petty cash. All the dockets are there. I'm allowed one room in the hotel as boarding, and I'm allowed to eat whatever is available in the hotel. No special food, but whatever is available. And he looked at me and he said, this is very unusual. This is very unusual. This is very unusual. That's all he could say was, it's very unusual. So I said, well, it's unusual times. I said, if I had to draw salary, where would you expect my name to be? He said, oh, at the top, of course. Yes, I said, and so I would pay myself a big wage. That would go onto my overdraft. So I would have to pay income tax on my wage. And because that money is going on to my overdraft, it goes on to the 20% payment which I have to make to the bank. I said, are you an economist? Does that make sense that I have to pay double whammy? And he said, very unusual, very unusual. I said, well, you can send your super chief inspector down and he can inspect all the books. He didn't turn up at all. Again, they had to accept logic and common sense. They knew they couldn't force me to take a wage, and I had given them a reason why. Although I was working minimum of 18 hours a day, 7 days a week. Now, how many people could do that? I was living, my main drink was coffee. Coffee, 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 and here we are, I'm still drinking coffee. I drink about 15, 18 cups of coffee per day.
Really?
For the last 35, 40 years, I've been drinking 15, 18 cups of coffee per day.